Hi everybody, I'm Beth Maitland, the Drama Queen Bee, and it's work day today in the studio. But before we roll up our sleeves and get started, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my essential sewing tools. Everybody, all the quilters and sewers I know have a list of things they've got to have near them to be able to do all of their creative functions. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that today. Any magazine you open, a quilting magazine or a sewing magazine, will have one of the most frequently asked questions will be a list from the contributors of what are their most essential sewing tools. So let's take a look at mine. First of all, we start off with the self-healing sewing mat. Gotta have it. To go with it, you need a variety of rulers. My most used ruler is this one, which is my straight edge, but these also serve different functions, and my rotary tool. So what happens with these rulers, some of this is just checking measurements. This is for machine embroidery. This one is for cutting squares and straight edges, and they come in a variety of sizes. This one is a 12-inch. They go every 2 inches down, 10-inch, 8-inch, 6, 4, you get the idea. Sometimes 5 also, depending on, and this is for cutting squares or squaring up some quilting bits. But this is my most used ruler, and what it does is it lines up all of my quilting straight edges, and I can use the markings on my cutting mat here, or I can use the marks on the ruler itself here to be able to cut straight edges and line everything up and trim everything up. And you must have a self-healing mat for underneath and a rotary cutter. I like this one in particular because it locks in place. You can either lock it closed like it is now so that the blade isn't exposed, and then by sliding this you can use it by squeezing, and then when you let it down there's no blade. But then also if you are needing it to stay open, you can also lock it in the open position so that every time you pick it up, it's ready to cut. But these are very sharp razor rollers, and you want to have safety is important, and so you want to have that covered when possible. Now I want to talk to you about my other cutting tools. Really, you only need 3 main ones. The rotary cutter. You need a good pair of large dressmaker shears, nice and sharp. Keep them new or get them sharpened at your sewing studio or the sewing store near you. A lot of them have scheduled sharpeners, people that sharpen knives and scissors that come like once a month. Make sure these are nice and sharp. You don't want to cut paper with them, fabric only. And then next to the sewing machine and nearby any kind of embroidery or trimming the ends of threads when you take something off the sewing machine, I always have these very sharp and very little tiny, so you can get into the tiniest creases and corners, little tiny shears. And then you want to be able to mark. And I love this kind of a marking tool. It has 2 sides. One side is water-soluble marker, and the other side is air-soluble. You want to test your fabric always before you use it, but what's great about this is that you can mark something, and then in a couple of days the markings will completely wear off just from air, or you can more immediately erase the marks by spritzing it with a squirt bottle of water and you're good. And then you've got to have pins. I always keep a lovely, this is made out of a little square of silk velvet and some decorations, but this is a pin cushion full of, I keep safety pins nearby. I keep assorted needles that are already threaded so that I can use those to tack up things or catch a corner that I missed or whatever when quilting binding, that sort of thing. And then straight pins of all kinds of varieties for the various jobs that you do. There are a couple of other finishing tools also I'd like to talk to you about. I want to keep my work area clean. I want to keep the lint out of my bobbin. I want to keep the lint off the surface because I don't want it to be picked up on other fabrics. So essentials, air, canned air to blow out the area that I'm working on. I use this mostly for my work surface. A lot of machine manufacturers, sewing machine manufacturers recommend that you don't use air inside your sewing machine and inside the bobbin case. So most sewing machines come with a little brush, so I clean out the bobbin case with the brush, and then I also use just a scrap of batting, just a little bit of batting that I have left over from kind of sewing project, any kind of quilt project. This is 100% cotton and it's fluffy. Felt will do, velvet will do, any panne, anything, fleece, anything with a little bit of a nap is a great duster. It gets all the lint off the area. You can dust around the bobbin case, the surface of your sewing machine. It's a great tool for cleanup to keep your area free from litter and lint and threads and extra things around that you don't want picked up on your project. And the last thing is, when I cut those threads, I want some kind of a product that I can seal the little knots so my threads don't fray. spray, both on machine embroidery. This is awesome. They have all kinds of different brands. Check with your sewing machine and sewing store and your quilt shop. Find out what they've got available. But it's just like a little clear glue that when you dab it on, it disappears and doesn't show on most fabrics. Always test your fabric first to make sure. But you dab it on the ends of the threads and it keeps it from fraying. The last thing I want to tell you about is the way I transport all these gadgets around from place to place. I use gardener's caddies. And this is a little funny brushed aluminum caddy for the garden. This is my sewing one. This is for construction sewing. I've got trim in there. I've got little pieces of Velcro. I've got various colors of threads. I've got ribbons. I've got a little heat cutting tool, all kinds of extra things, pinking shears and regular sewing shears, extra things that cut around corners. And I take that from my work table, my cutting table, to the sewing machine. And then when I do machine embroidery, I have a bigger basket. This is my caddy for machine embroidery, and what's in here are all kinds of my stabilizers. I have my under stabilizer, tear away and leave in, sew in, heat in, and I have my toppings for when I'm doing something over a nap like terry cloth or velvet to keep the threads held down. I also keep in a little bit of basting spray, a couple of extra pairs of scissors, a couple of extra rulers, some trim, some other glue, some other things that you might need, but this is my embroidery one. It's a much bigger caddy, as you can see, but it keeps everything in one place, and I always put everything back so I know when I need it I can just grab it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Beth Maitland, the Drama Queen Bee.